Welcome to the Soul Archaeology podcast, a space for connection, resonance, witnessing, and learning. Together we'll harvest medicine from the spiral of life, sharing conversations with other embodied humans who have navigated their own initiations and found alignment with their true soul essence. With weekly astrology, energy updates, embodied conversation, and channeled teachings, this is a space for you to land and find resonance with the spiral of your own soul. Hello, and welcome back to Soul Archaeology. I am recording this from Telluride, Colorado, on our way back to Los Angeles. We've been on such a journey over the last month, and this is our final stop before we land back in Topanga, back home. This is something I've really been pondering before we get into the astro weather, but really pondering the impact that traveling across the country can have on you and how important it really is to understand the fabric of our country. For those of you that don't know, we drove from Los Angeles to St. Louis, Missouri, up to northern Wisconsin, over to North Carolina, and all the way back to Los Angeles. So this is definitely a journey that I've done many different times, not all the way to the East Coast, but it's so eye-opening and really helpful in understanding truly the fabric of this country when you get to interact with and experience the areas and places you would not normally visit, interacting with the culture and the people there. And I really think that if you are American, I have a lot of listeners who are not, so this is, doesn't necessarily apply to you, but can apply to you in your own country. I feel that it's really important to get out of our echo chambers, out of our comfortable pockets that we live within, the spaces that we live within. Even if it's in a large city, sometimes that can create its own echo chamber, and leaving that and experiencing other parts of the country, other parts of the world is incredibly powerful and can really shape your perspective and shape your consciousness. And this is also coming from a Sagittarius moon. But I do believe, especially in our current climate, where there's so much polarization, so much separation, or really the illusion of separation, if you have the means, I know, of course, not everyone has the means to take a cross-country road trip, but even just go visit a place you would not normally visit. Try to understand or even just take in the experiences of others, people who are unlike you. I personally feel that it's so important, especially during these times and during an election year, and when there's so much vitriol and so much charge and so much anger and angst, to understand your fellow country people, to understand why people have certain beliefs, to spend a day in their community or a day in their shoes, or even just experience an hour driving through the town to perhaps understand why they have the perspective that they have. I definitely live in a little pocket in Topanga, and it's really interesting to see how vast and how different many other communities are across the US. And it really makes us more well-rounded, understanding, compassionate, conscious humans when we're able to pull out of our own pockets of comfort and familiarity. That's when we get to experience and expand our consciousness to understand the other. So, as I end this journey, I'm just recapping a little bit, but there are many areas that I visited that I would not necessarily choose to visit, or they weren't necessarily on my bucket list, but it's been a really enriching experience in understanding what other people are going through, to understand my own privilege and where my beliefs come from, which come from my own personal lived experience. And that's something that's so important for all of us to remember now as we experience this major rift in our collective fabric, is that we all form our beliefs through our lived experiences. And that diversity creates a nutrient-rich soil. And this is certainly helpful information as we head into this very fiery and very powerful full moon in Aries this week. In last week's episode, I talked a lot about Mars and Pluto and really the energetic climate that they're creating together as they begin their interaction over the next few weeks. Like I said, this is a very martial time. It's a very plutonic time. And when you mix those two energies, we get underground fires, subterranean fires. It starts to uncover where we hold unresolved anger, unresolved grief, which transforms into anger, where we're self-protecting, where we hold fear. As these two begin to create their opposition, they begin to put pressure on each other over the next few weeks, really over the next few months, because Mars begins its retrograde in December. So it will pass its opposition point with Pluto, and then it will pass back over it, and then pass back over it again as it navigates its 5-month retrograde through Cancer and Leo. To add to the intensity, we have Mercury entering Scorpio and Venus leaving Scorpio and entering Sagittarius this week. So there's a lot of this subterranean fire. There's a lot of fire and pressure being created in the underworld for all of us individually, but also collectively. So there's this pressure building to say something that you need to say, to initiate a conversation, to activate change within your relationships. And this intensity of all of these major planets in cardinal signs and all of the different elements of the cardinal signs, we're being asked to initiate change, to face our fears, our programs, our wounds, whatever is keeping us out of the change that we know we need to make. Or perhaps you're not aware of the change that's being asked of you at this time. This week, it could very likely be exposed. The pathway could be exposed. The change that needs to occur could come to the surface in a way that's surprising or unexpected. With Mercury entering a fixed sign like Scorpio, things might feel more challenging to express, or it might feel like you're responding from fears or wounding or deepening into self-protective or defensive tendencies. But there's so much opportunity this week and over the next few weeks to truly liberate ourselves from the fears that keep us stuck, that keep us fixed, that keep us held within old, outdated patterns, beliefs, systems, relationships that are no longer serving the present and the future timelines we're being asked to click into, but rather serve the past, the old timelines. And as I say this, the wind keeps picking up. It's certainly a time for change. And with this more volatile astro weather, we of course are being asked to seek inner groundedness, inner anchoring that helps us navigate these more tumultuous times, these times that hold rapid change with sovereignty, with regulation, with more ease, or if not ease, at least groundedness and safety within our system so that we can respond from that root, that sense of groundedness, understanding, compassion, rather than from the wound or the mind. So this week on October 17th, we have a full moon, actually a supermoon, at 4:26 a.m. Pacific at 24 degrees Aries. And I've been talking a lot about the last degrees of cardinal placements and really the role that they play over the next month especially. We have the sun and the moon at 24 degrees Aries and 24 degrees Libra. We have Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn and Mars at 22 degrees Cancer. We have Chiron at 21 degrees Aries. So there's a lot happening at the late stages of the cardinal placements, which means we are being asked to sit with our relationship with change, to examine any fears we hold around change, what keeps us from change, where we are gripping to the familiar, knowing that change is being asked of us during this time. And this full moon will certainly reveal where we are gripping to the old, to the outdated, and to our fears of change, of the unknown. Aries is a cardinal fire sign representing action, reaction, initiation, movement, change, identity, heat, power, leadership. It's the first sign of the zodiac. It's associated with the first house of identity. And through Aries, we learn our agency. We learn our power. We begin to understand that we are co-creators through our own journey of self-awareness. We begin to form the roots of our sense of self, which enables us to begin to build an identity, to begin to build the self, which will then in turn interact with the world. This is the foundation, the ego. And in its highest expression, Aries is the conscious warrior. It's able to navigate a visceral and honest journey of self-discovery and self-awareness so that it's able to transmute its own pain around power, around identity, to maintain a healthy sense of self as it moves through the world, as it interacts with others. So often we feel the shadow of Aries, which is victim consciousness, helplessness, powerlessness, anger and fear, reactivity, manipulation. Aries is ruled by Mars, which makes this a very interesting full moon because we have this full moon actually squaring Mars as well, which I will get into in a moment. But it certainly creates this landscape to do some very deep work around our sense of self. And as we know, a full moon occurs when it is opposite the sun in the lunar cycle. So it begins to reveal our hidden parts, our shadow aspects, reveal our full spectrum of identity and emotions. The sun fully illuminates the moon, which is our internal landscape, our emotional landscape. So we get to peer into aspects of self that aren't necessarily as readily available to us. It's an opportunity to release what we see that does not serve, to examine our internal landscape, to open ourselves to integrate more light, more awareness, more consciousness. When we work with the energy of a full moon, we receive an upgrade through our own self-awareness. So one of the evolutionary purposes of Aries is to help us fully understand our own power, our power as a co-creator with the universe, our power as a sovereign, self-aware being. And from there, what we do with our power really is a reflection of our own consciousness. To become warriors of light, conscious warriors, we must be able to access and integrate and love the different parts of ourselves, the wounded aspects of self, which requires this full illumination, this willingness or ability or maturation to fully open ourselves to witness the different aspects of self, maybe the parts that we aren't necessarily as happy with or proud of. When we forget that we are co-creators with the universe, when we forget that we are powerful, that we are sovereign, that we are connected to this complex fabric of humanity. We lose our power and drop into victim consciousness, helplessness, this space where we don't have access to or don't have the ability to find our sense of power, direction, purpose. Aries in its highest expression is a conscious leader. It moves from the heart, not from the ego. And we are all leaders within our own lives. When we choose to operate from this space, we liberate ourselves from the patterns of dependency, addiction, manipulation, helplessness. So this is an incredibly powerful full moon in and of itself. It is going to be activating the solar eclipse we had in Aries in April of 2024. So that was a very powerful solar eclipse. This is in many ways a checkpoint, a revisiting of the intentions we set during that time, of the patterns we were working through, of the tests we were given. This is a full illumination of our internal landscape, our own individual underworld. The moon in Aries is always a bit heated, but this one in particular is quite intense because we have a T-square that's formed between the sun, the moon, and Pluto, and another T-square on the other side of the chart that's happening between the sun, the moon, and Mars. So Mars and Pluto, like I said, are beginning to enter into their opposition. With Pluto at 29 degrees and Mars at 22 degrees of Cancer, they're beginning this journey, and they are heavily activating and pressurizing this full moon in Aries. Pluto, at the anaretic degree of 29 degrees Capricorn, is finishing up its journey through Capricorn, where it's been since 2008. This is a deeply karmic point, which is adding a deepening and karmic layer to this full moon in Aries. Pluto's been retrograding and just went direct on October 11th. So it's been pulling back, reviewing, gathering wisdom, more wisdom, information, and data. And now it's fully charged as it moves forward, bringing with it all of the data and wisdom we've gained since May, and really since 2008. I talk a lot about Pluto going direct in the last episode, so if you haven't listened to it, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to that episode to really understand what this means for you individually within your own chart and also collectively. With Pluto squaring or pressurizing both the moon and the sun, it's really forcing us to look beneath the surface, to look within our own internal underworld, our own relationship to power, to success, to money, to identity, to purpose. What does it look like to be a leader within your own life? Are you acting like a leader within your own life, within your own community, within your own family unit? Or are you falling into the victim consciousness that really plagues our world during this time? Are you forgetting your own innate power and wisdom, your own innate purpose? This is a time of transmuting fear, dissolving anything keeping you from your power, from a deepened connection to self, from self-confidence. Pluto will be bringing us into the underworld, especially over the next month as it navigates its last journey through Capricorn before it enters Aquarius on November 19th. But especially as it begins to apply pressure to this full moon and to its opposition with Mars, which is the planet of action, of change. So I believe in many ways, Mars is sort of driving this movement over the next few months. It's really asking for us to create change, to find our courage, to face what's holding us into past frameworks. And Pluto is bringing us deeper into that work. We're looking at the shadow aspects of Libra, the opposition to Aries, especially as we navigate this lunar axis of the South Node in Libra and the North Node in Aries, which we've been navigating since July of 2023. Where are we falling into patterns of avoidance, people-pleasing, self-abandonment, and dissociating from our lives to avoid conflict, to avoid tension, to avoid pain, and to avoid going into the parts of ourselves that we need to access in order to move forward more self-aware, more healed, being beacons of light rather than density. And with Pluto navigating the last degree of Capricorn, that's the anaretic degree, it's a very powerful karmic point of purging, of completion, of karma. This is a point that brings us into our past. And we know that we have to, at times, go back into the past to heal what has been so that we can move forward more whole, more complete, more healed, more self-aware, so that we can operate from our hearts more often than our wounds. That's really the goal of this lived experience, is to anchor more deeply into our hearts, to transmute the density so that we can anchor more light, not only for ourselves, but for the planet. The influence of Mars and the full moon in Aries. Mars rules Aries. This full moon is ruled by Mars and it's being squared by Mars. Mars takes action. This will show us where we have been avoiding conflict, avoiding challenge, avoiding the sticky or dark places over the last 15 years, and really forcing us to create change, to face our fears around change, to face our fears around the unfamiliar or the unknown. The energy of Mars squaring this full moon, opposing Pluto, will really help us in creating the change that we need to create to finally complete cycles. It's hot and fiery, it's pushy, it's intense. It's going to push us over the edge in many ways. It's going to locate within our lives where we are withholding in order to not rock the boat, in order to not have to go into certain aspects of self that are scary or overwhelming. Mars is pushy, and it will really reveal within ourselves wherever we've been resisting, avoiding, or dissociating. This is the time where we grab the reins of our lives. I've said this a lot in other podcast episodes, but this time with the North Node in Aries is all about taking the reins of our lives, transmuting the fear of being in control over our lives, of being empowered within our lives for whatever reason. So often it's because we have a fear of failure. We have a fear of being truly connected to our power, because we might lose people. We might dissolve those relational patterns that we've held onto for so long. And therefore, the people we've connected to through those patterns of self-abandonment or disempowerment might leave our lives. What's being revealed right now is the karmic data, material, the contracts, the people, the relationships, the patterns that have kept us disempowered, tied and tethered and shackled to our patterns of the past that are no longer serving. It will reveal the subconscious programs we have that keep us out of our power, out of our sovereignty, and out of our agency. And they're so sneaky. Victim consciousness is so sneaky. And I actually did an entire episode on victim consciousness. Episode 29 talks all about victim consciousness and why I think that it's really at the root of so many of our societal and individual issues. And I do believe that there is often a part of ourselves or a space that creates a collapse, which drops us into victim consciousness. And it's really the work of navigating our own internal underworld, our own subconscious, to see where this fragmentation occurred, where this collapse occurs, so that we can click into our power in a new way. And just to remind you, when I say power, I don't mean power through the ego. I mean power through the heart. Becoming conscious warriors, leaders of the heart. We have very few examples of this in our collective right now. So we must become it. We must become it in our own individual lives. We must become it for ourselves, for our children, for our neighbors, for our friends and our communities. But we can only access that space when we are able to navigate our own internal underworld, to face the fear of going down into that space. This moon is also conjunct Chiron, which is in Aries. And I'll talk about that in a moment, because this is really providing a key or an opportunity to access the spaces within ourselves that hold the deepest core wound, to liberate ourselves from that victim consciousness, from that space or that illusion of separateness or helplessness, so that we can liberate ourselves and our communities. Something to really take into consideration when we are talking about Aries, talking about Mars. This is a very martial time, so we need to address the fact that the shadow aspect of Aries and Mars is childishness, adolescent and immature behaviors. If we think about Aries, it is the spark, it is the beginning. It is also the child. It's the first part of the zodiac. It's the first stage. So in its shadow, it can be childish. It can be immature, selfish. And there's a very fine line between anchoring into oneself and operating from the heart and operating from the ego, operating from this space of selfishness, of self-centeredness, of overconfidence, or a lack of awareness of the other. And this is why it's so important when we're talking about any energy, the embodiment of any sign, is to look at the highest expression of it, its light and not its shadow. And the light or highest expression of Aries is having self-awareness so that it can anchor to self in a way that's healthy, but not operate from a space of selfishness, childishness, and immaturity. We need to use the wisdom that we gain through the journey of self-awareness to create a more embodied sense of self, so that we can relate to the other in a way that's more compassionate, more understanding, more anchored. With the pressure of Mars and Pluto, anger can be boiling to the surface during this time. Things could really boil over the next few weeks, over the next few months. And this full moon could be the spark. It could be the fire that Mars and Pluto need to really make the change that they're looking for. This moon is really supporting us in facing our fears, confronting our avoidant tendencies, and tying up loose ends. It's a completion moon. It's really going to help us review and release where we've held ourselves in unsupportive patterns around our power, our truth, courage, identity. And in order to do that, we must acknowledge our young, adolescent, immature patterns of the past. It can bring anger to the surface, like I said, so it's really an important time to sit with what is beneath the anger. Anger is a protective mechanism. It's telling us where we have felt unsafe in the past, where we have felt like we need to protect ourselves, where we have alarm bells signaling that something wasn't right. When we go beneath anger, we're able to transmute the core root wound that led to the anger in the first place. We can't simply avoid or suppress the anger. We have to go beneath it to acknowledge the grief, to acknowledge the shame, to acknowledge the disappointment, the pain that we're trying to protect. And this really leads us to the next layer of this full moon. This is a very layered full moon. If we just were to look at the surface of it, it would tell only a very small portion of the story. This moon is also conjunct Chiron. And Chiron's actually currently retrograde in Aries. I have many clients who have Chiron and Aries natally, so they're in their Chiron return, and it's such a powerful and potent time to work with this energy to access their own golden key of healing. Chiron is the asteroid of the wounded healer, so it really shows us within our charts where we hold our deepest pain. And I love to work with Chiron in my own work with clients because it tells us oftentimes where we hold the most karma, the most core wounding, not only from childhood, but from past lives, past experiences, ancestry. So there's so much charge held within our Aries placement. Oftentimes it is the wound that never heals, but it becomes our teacher when we allow it to. And that's really the goal of Chiron, It's not to heal all of our wounds or transmute all of our wounds or bypass our wounds, but it's forming a relationship with our wounding so that it may become our teacher rather than our enemy. Chiron in Aries in particular is revealing where we hold wounding around identity, power, strength, courage. Once again, where we drop into victim consciousness, where we avoid becoming our own liberators for whatever reason, whatever subconscious belief is there, where we feel that we need to fight to defend rather than move through the fear and anchor to the higher heart. This layer of Chiron influencing this full moon, influencing Mars and Pluto right now, is the golden key for the opportunity to truly do the deep work healing. Chiron is shaped like a key. Its symbol is a key. It's a key to the deepest parts of our being, our deepest core wounds, where we can liberate ourselves for healing, to not only bring that healing to our own self, but also to others. I love looking and working with people's Chiron placements because it tells us not only where they are doing their deepest healing within this lived experience, but also the medicine that they bring to the world. If you're looking for purpose, Chiron is a good place to look. Also the North Node. Chiron is not only where we hold core wounding, but also where we hold our medicine. So it shows us where we experience our deepest pain, but also our greatest medicine to give to the world. So having a Chiron in Aries can be that you feel like it's hard for you to access your power, to access your true sense of identity. Maybe there's core wounding around anger, but it's often that people with Chiron and Aries are also able to make others really feel seen, really feel encouraged, empowered. So when we allow ourselves to create intimacy with and compassion for our own wounding, when we are able to go into those spaces, we're able to transmute the fear into a gift. And this gift we're able to give others. So this full moon holds this layer of Chiron, and it allows us to transform what's coming forward, the pain, the grief, the anger, the fear, into an opportunity for deeper healing. It's what enables us to be conscious warriors and conscious leaders, leaders from the heart, because we must go into our own internal landscape and do our own internal work in order to be true leaders, true conscious warriors. And so often I think in, the spiritual world or the healing world, we see a lot of patterns of bypassing, of staying in the light. But in order to anchor more light, which is really the goal of this lifetime, we have to transmute our density. We must go within the parts of ourselves that hold shadow, that hold fear, that hold shame, and bring our own love and compassion, bring our own hearts to that space. We don't transform when we stay at the surface, when we stay only in the light. This is why the feminine journey is through the underworld and up. It's the spiral, because we must go around, we must go deep and within. It's not linear. And as conscious warriors, we really raise our frequency and integrate more light when we transmute our own pain and wounds and suffering. And it's a conscious warrior because we're activating the courage of Aries to look at the spaces within us that are scary or are shameful. We need courage to face our fears. And this is what this full moon will be asking of us, is to face our fears, to face our shadow, to go into the spaces within us that we are afraid to go within, to create more balance, more harmony, more peace within self, more centeredness that then creates a ripple effect through space and time and creates more healing on the planet. This is the phoenix rising from the ashes. But in order to do so, we must confront where we're still holding on to pain and suffering from the past. This is a good time to sit with your relationship with pain and suffering, discomfort, The next few months might be very uncomfortable as we're asked to face these fears, face our own relationship with change, our own relationship with shame, pain, anger, discomfort. We are being invited into deeper relationship with our power through self-awareness of what's unhealed or what's wounded within us, because we all carry wounding, and it is our key to liberation. It's our key to anchoring more light and becoming the people and the leaders we truly desire to be. That's why it's so often that we see leaders in this very patriarchal, very old and outdated system of government, of pedestaling celebrities, leaders, CEOs. So often you see that these people stop doing the deep work, the underworld work. They stop checking their ego. They stop going into these spaces of self-inquiry because there's such a desire to remain in control, remain in power, that if they were to go within those spaces, they would have to acknowledge their wounding. But what's really wild is that that's what creates a leader. Someone who's able to go through many ego deaths, many spaces of transformation and change. Those are the people I really look up to, are those who have walked the path of death and rebirth many, many different times. It's people who have pasts that are challenging, who might have been through many different things, that are able to integrate more aspects of self and to create more wholeness because they have navigated those spaces. It's an important time to remember that you are a divine being in Earth School. Regardless of what chapter you're on, there's a big integration and initiation portal open and available right now. This is a time to practice self-awareness and embodiment. This is such a crucial time, but a very intense time. It feels like we are in the exam period of Earth School. So I am sending you so much love, as you might feel the intensity build. If you've been doing a lot of this work over the last year, if you have a lot of cardinal placements at the last few degrees, or really the beginning degrees as well, because the North and South Node have been making their way through, you might have already been doing this work, and it might not feel as intense because you've already been able to find the courage to navigate these shadow spaces and do the work. If you feel it intensely, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It just means you are entering into a new chapter of work. So I'm sending you so much love wherever you are, whatever you're navigating. Thank you as always for being here, for supporting Soul Archaeology, for showing up and listening every week, sharing on Instagram, sharing on social media, sharing with friends. All of that is so imperative in keeping this podcast going and running and moving. So thank you so much for participating and for showing up and supporting. I will not be hosting a full moon workshop this month because there's a lot happening, a lot going on. I have a lot of new mentorship clients starting this week, and I've really had to honor my capacity during this time. So thank you for understanding. We will be back next month with a full moon workshop. I hope you have a beautiful week, a potent, powerful, and very intentional full moon.